Hi guys, welcome back to the Blood Bible, RUE MORGUE TV's show on the fundamentals of horror. In the last episode, we talked about what horror is. Today, we're going to tackle why we love it. Stay tuned. So, last episode of the Blood Bible, we came up with a working definition of what horror is, and I think we came up with one that really addresses the heart of the matter. Today, we're going to talk about another question that horror fans get asked a lot. I get asked this all the time, and that is, why do you like that shit? And it's a bit of a challenging question to answer because there is something of an assumption underlying that question. Let's face it, if I were a sports fan, nobody would really question that because sports are considered a perfectly normal thing to like, whereas immersing my brain in horror movies and books and comics and games is still considered a little bit abnormal. So sometimes people are coming to you with that assumption in mind, and it can make you feel defensive, and that's totally understandable. But I think it's really important not to get your back up because, first of all, the person could be coming from a genuine place of curiosity. And second of all, if they already think you're a psychopath, there's really no point in giving them more ammo for that. And further to that, there are very articulate answers you can give to this question without getting your back up. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So why do we like horror? There are two ways to answer that question. One of them is pretty straightforward, but also a little bit facetious, and the other one can lead to way more interesting places. So I invite you to consider all these reasons that I'm going to give and see which one works best for you, because what you love about horror is as distinct as your fingerprint, and some reasons are going to resonate with you more than others, and I think more than anything, this discussion is fruitful if you're honest and you speak from the heart. So, why do we like horror? Reason number one, there is no reason. Now, hear me out. I know that sounds totally annoying, and it's going to sound totally annoying if you use it, but really, why does anyone like anything? Liking something doesn't originate from your rational mind. You don't choose what food you like and what things you like. You either like them or you don't. And if you want to be a jerk about it, you can say, I have a biological predilection for it, or it's in my DNA. That's really not going to go anywhere, but fundamentally it all boils down to we don't really know why we like the things that we like. Now, as I said, that answer isn't really going to endear you to anyone. It's not really going to get this conversation off on the right foot. So what I invite you to consider is to steer the conversation in a different direction. Instead of why do you like horror, talk about what it is you like about horror. You'll get a lot more out of that conversation, I think. So let's get into the big reasons that are often brought up, kind of like in a wide lens, why human beings are interested in horror as a species. Number one is catharsis. The word catharsis comes from the Greek word for purification, and it indicates the process of releasing and thereby providing relief from strong or repressed emotions. So how is horror cathartic? According to Aristotle, art can be used as therapy. If you're experiencing what Aristotle termed excessive passions, then art could actually put them back into balance. So it would restore and purify you. Now, in modern day, we use the word catharsis a little bit differently. We would use it in the sense of there are a lot of emotions that we can't express on a day-to-day basis, like rage and violence. And in this way, watching horror can be cathartic in that seeing someone go out and bust some heads is a lot better than doing so yourself with a baseball bat. I think anyone you're having this conversation with would agree with that. Reason number two, mortality. Everyone who was ever born will surely die. Or, as David Cronenberg once said, we've all got the disease of being finite. Death is the basis of all horror. Now, what Cronenberg is referring to here is that horror grants us the ability to play with a subject that is really, for the most part, kept away from us. And it's kept away from us by the death industry. Here in the West, we have a very death-phobic society. We keep death and dying and burial and all those processes behind a curtain, so to speak. And there are death-positive movements happening here in the West, in the US and in Canada, where people are kind of reclaiming death and celebrating death, and it's not something that we have to hide away from. And I think horror serves that same purpose in that it allows us to engage with the subject of death in a variety of ways. It can be playful, it can be funny, it can be dark, it can be savage, it can be violent, it can be sad. There's a number of different ways to approach it, but the point is that it's approaching it. And death is something that's going to touch us all, but horror lets us take that pill a little bit more smoothly. Reason number 3, fear. There's a reason people love roller coasters, and it's the thrill. Adrenaline produces a real physiological response in us. It's that feeling in the pit of our stomach, that feeling of our hair standing on end. That's adrenaline, and adrenaline is something that the body produces that is actually clinically addictive. So you can think of horror fiends as getting high on their own supply. It produces a real buzz. Watching horror movies and reading horror books can ramp up these fear responses and give us that buzz that we crave. It's a kind of excitement that isn't for everyone, but horror fans who like it a lot. A 4th reason, mystery. As celebrated author H.P. Lovecraft once said, "The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown." And maybe that's why Lovecraft's stories deal with the unknown, the unknowable, the unfathomable, things that are just beyond the reach of the human mind. You can look at horror as a creative way to explore the unknown. And obviously the unknown is the unknown. We don't know it, but in exploring that, we can come up with nice possibilities. We can come up with sunshine and rainbows and heaven and unicorns and stuff like that. But frankly, I'm more interested in the dark side of those possibilities, the monsters that lurk in the closet. Anyway, whether you're an optimist or a pessimist like me, what we can say for sure is that mystery and fear have always been kissing cousins. Where knowledge ends, fear begins. Reason number 5, taboo. Some people are drawn to those things that aren't accepted or allowed by the community in which they find themselves. Yes, we enjoy many freedoms in our society, but there's still a lot of stigma surrounding certain behaviors and practices and even topics of interest. Now, horror is one such topic that is considered taboo, and it's even been historically referred to as the pornography of violence. But curiosity about taboo is perfectly normal. If someone tells you not to look at something or that you shouldn't do something, don't you want to look at it? Don't you want to do it? It's the most natural thing in the world. And if you look closely at things that are considered taboo, they all have value in our society. And when it comes to horror, that value is in the darkness, the ugliness, the violence, the undesirableness. That provides a contrast with everything that is light and beautiful in the world. And you can't have light without shadow. And without that shadow, the world would look pretty flat and meaningless. So why do we like horror anyway? Well, why does anyone like anything? We here at RUE MORGUE dream of the day that we don't have to answer this question all the time. But until that day, I hope this episode has given you some tools to keep in your back pocket next time you have this discussion. And hopefully it's a good discussion, one that maybe helps you learn a little bit more about yourself and what it is you love about the genre. Thank you for joining me for the Blood Bible. I'm Andrea Subissati, and we'll see you next time. And the existence of that darkness is what provides contrast with everything else in the world. What the fuck am I talking about?